Market has cooled off a bit, but we're still seeing multiple offer situations. And whether you're a buyer or seller, what are the best ways to navigate multiple offers? Stay tuned to this episode to hear more. The Den, powered by the Lyons Group, a show dedicated to exploring hot topics in real estate, local happenings, and industry trends. We're a small team of professionals approaching $400 million in sales and nearly 2,000 local transactions. You're listening to time-tested experts and industry leaders. Here's a refreshing look at real estate happenings and more. Welcome to The Den. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Den. Today, we're going to be talking about multiple offers and how you handle that, whether you're a buyer or a seller. There's a lot of information to go through and to understand when you're responding to a multiple offer as a seller or you're making an offer as a buyer and you're competing with others. But before we get to that, let me introduce my friends, my partners, my co-hosts, the fellow members of the Lyons Group. To my left, Paul, hand me the Rockberry, Aspen, the Ninja Groen, and the boss, Shannon Martin Martinez. My name is Ben Lyons, and I'm your host of The Den, top brokers taking on tough questions. And today's question is all about multiple offers. Now, if you're a buyer or a seller, you have different approaches, right? And so I'm going to hardball this one to Shannon. If you're working with a buyer or a seller, you can pick one or the other. What is the best way to navigate multiple offers?
So I'm going to give my best advice for both. And I would say if you are a buyer, it's not the time to hold back. If you're a buyer, it's time to put your best foot forward. You've got other people wanting the same house as you want, and you give everything you can give. It's not time to give a little bit and we can always come up later. You start with your best foot forward. I would say from a seller's perspective, the highest price isn't always going to win. But you have to understand there's a lot of contingencies in there. You might have a buyer that doesn't want inspections, that wants to buy it as is. That could be a huge benefit for you. Or someone that wants a long closing or a short closing. There's a lot of different factors that play in there that could make it right for you. So having a good realtor that can break down each purchase agreement and look at all of the terms and really have an honest discussion with you about what works for you is probably your best choice. Is take your time. Don't focus on net. That's not always the way.
Yeah, I was hoping she'd strike out on that. No, I know. She just hits my curveballs all over the fence. Great answer, Shannon. I like that.
Thank you.
Aspen, obviously we've been in multiple offer situations many times over the last few years, especially. What are your thoughts specifically for a buyer? And then we'll move to seller, but specifically for a buyer in a situation where they're competing with other offers. What do you tell them? What does that conversation look like?
I think the first thing that your realtor needs to do is call the listing broker because like Shannon was saying, the highest offer might not be the best. I had a multiple offer situation on a house in Colorado, and these people came in over asking. I think it was like a 10-day close, no contingencies, just wanted to get it done. But that wasn't very appealing to my sellers because it was being used as a short-term rental. They wanted to finish out some of their obligations that they had. They didn't want to leave people high and dry. They wanted a little bit more time. So the broker that actually called and asked what they wanted ended up winning the offer, even though the offers were very close. And that one offer seemed really competitive and really appealing. It just wasn't what my sellers were wanting.
Yeah, their anticipation for what your sellers wanted is a different ballgame than what they actually wanted. In fact, we just had that situation play out where we were working with the seller and we received 4 offers in on the property, but only one realtor called and said, what makes sense for your seller? What's the closing time frame? And what are the aspects that really make sense for your seller? And we had a frank conversation. I would have had that conversation with everyone that would have called, but only one of the 4 realtors called, and that realtor actually won out because they understood that my sellers wanted to close early, wanted a post-occupancy because they were building a new home. So to your point, very great point in regard to have a conversation with the other realtor. Find out what their pressure points are, or their, what did you call it when we were dealing with negotiation? Their stressors, right? What are the stressors?
Yeah, the levers.
Yeah. What are the stressors? So taking that to the next step, as when you're working with a seller and you receive multiple offers, how do you navigate that conversation with your seller? And what should sellers do to put themselves in the best position?
So one thing that, again, your realtor should be doing is really organizing everything nice so you can see what the differences are, because at first glance, some of them might seem very similar or might seem the same, especially if you're not used to reading these 30-plus page contracts. And one might sound really appealing, but maybe there's a bunch of contingencies. Maybe they want you to pay closing costs and a few other things. So maybe that actually bumps the price down below asking, or, you just need to have it all laid out really clearly, really concisely. And if they're really close, I would probably recommend doing a notification of multiple offers and then making sure everyone was coming in with their best foot forward. And then if they are, then you just have to really kind of start nitpicking different things. Maybe you're looking at the contingencies or home warranties or even the loan types just to kind of see what might be more appealing or a little bit easier to work with. But I think something that a lot of sellers really like is when you just put your best foot forward first. Because if you're coming in and you're saying, oh, well, I'll offer this, but I'm going to start here. And then you come in with an offer $30,000 higher. The seller might be like, okay, so they're going to really try and negotiate later on.
Yeah.
I think that can be something. And then you could also do an escalation clause. So where you're coming in and then it says, well, I'll pay up to, 30,000 over, but I'm only going to pay 1,000 over the highest offer. One thing that I think you risk with that is I've had a situation where we just countered back at that price because all the other offers were quite a bit lower. Some were under asking. And then, the buyer was happy because they won the offer, but
and they didn't necessarily know what the other offers come in at. So, and for our viewers, just to explain an escalation clause, and I like to use round numbers because I'm a simple person, but let's just say you have a $100,000 property and you make an offer at $100,000, but you include an escalation clause up to $120,000. What that means is that you beat the next highest offer all the way up to $120,000. So for example, if someone else offered $109,000, you would escalate above them to a predetermined price, maybe $500 or $1,000 above the next best offer. So in that situation, if another person offered $109,000, your offer would automatically go to $110,000. It wouldn't escalate all the way up to $120,000. However, in Aspen's situation, this is where some buyers need to be prepared to go to their top dollar. Aspen is saying that you just counter offer right at their escalated premium, the top dollar, $120,000.
Yeah. And they had some other offers. None of them were even close to this high escalation clause, but we had a little bit of time and a little bit of wiggle room for the other offers. I think we had about a 48-hour response time. So they just countered back, gave a 24-hour response time. And then there was a little bit, if they said, oh, no, never mind, we're not going to do that, there was other options that they could.
Yes. And thank you for saying that, because I think it's, again, very important for our viewers to understand that you need a competent realtor to navigate these things, because there is a game within the game. So what Aspen just alluded to was the fact that you have a deadline to respond to at 48 hours out, and you may have 3 buyers that you're dealing with. You can go back to one of the buyers and say, will you take these terms? And we need to know within 24 hours. And if that buyer doesn't work out, you can work to your next buyer. As long as you don't breach that 48-hour window, you can play the game within the game. And that's where a competent realtor that knows what they're doing, knows how to navigate these waters, really can help add some extra money and really take care of you during the process of that. So thank you for pointing that out. Paul, multiple offer situation, you're dealing with the buyers. Remember, you cannot duct tape a seller to a chair and force them to, you will like this.
Y'all ever had deja vu?
Yeah. You will like this and you will liking it. You cannot duct tape sellers to the chair, but how do you put your buyer in the best position to win that multiple offer situation?
So I was just thinking about, we're actually under contract on a house with somebody that we were had multiple offers. I called up the listing agent, like you had talked about. They were both over asking price. Ours was going to be, it has a lender. So we did an escalation clause, and we did, about 15,000 over and bumped up by 1,000. It was a pretty standard escalation clause, but we had some terms that were, I think, better than the other ones. They were over asking, but they were short time frames. And what happened was it was kind of still under construction. So the seller needed longer to finish those repairs before we could close. So we won with that escalation clause. And I think, like Shannon said at the beginning, put your best foot forward. And then if you're going to do an escalation clause, be ready to pay whatever it is. And one thing about escalation clauses, it's $1,000 over the highest netting offer.
Yes.
So it's not just over that price.
Thank you for
Your realtor has to do the net outs for all those offers, and then it bumps up. And then you have to prove it. Like if you're the listing agent, you then have to prove to everybody, here's where that offer is. this is why we went to that price.
Here's the competing offer that pushed your escalation up. Now,
Right.
However, there is a caveat, and thank you for explaining that. There is a caveat to that where Aspen said, I'll just counteroffer and not include the escalation, but I'm counteroffering at their top dollar on the escalation. In that scenario, you do not have to prove that there was another offer that pushed that escalation up. Do we see any heartburn there or any issues there?
No, because really, if you get multiple offers, you can negotiate with all of them. You can pick one. You don't have to answer all of them. The seller has the right to do whatever they want in that instance, without lying to anybody.
Yeah, always keep things on the right side.
Right.
But I've had brokers, in a multiple offer situation, send me an offer and they put a 12-hour time frame on there. And then they call me and they say, hey, you didn't respond to my offer within 12 hours. And my response is, my seller doesn't have to go left when your buyer says turn left. They can respond however they want to. Now, if they choose to respond during that time frame, they can, or they can wait and collect offers. So they're not beholden to that offer or the time frames within that offer until it becomes a contract. And at which point, then the time frames kick in. Now, having said that, we're talking about buyers here. What about as-is offers?
Well,
what are your thoughts?
I will say, Ben, though, on that one, if you give out and say we have a deadline to other offers, we have a deadline of 48 hours, then pretty much you're now beholden to that one.
Yes, and professionally,
yes.
Right? So I appreciate you saying that. So if you tell the general public and you tell the brokers you're working with, we're going to respond to all these offers Monday at noon, then you have a professional obligation to the buyers and to the other realtors to respond by noon. But my point is, if someone submits, you've got everyone playing the rules, and you've got someone that submits and says, hey, you got to respond to me in 6 hours. You're fair to say, no, I do not. Neither do the sellers.
Right.
Obviously, it's the seller's choice. But
I think something they don't realize too, a lot of, I would say newer brokers, just because you put that timeline on there, my seller can sign that in a week. And it doesn't mean that the contract is void. It's just voidable.
Yeah.
So the buyer can still say, okay, yep, we're going to keep with this contract. But it's not a hard, fast date because you don't have a contract yet. It's just a courtesy, really, to respond by that time.
Yeah, and that is a great point. I mean, so a week later, you sign off on that. It's an extreme, but a week later, the seller signs off on it and the buyer says, hey, that's great. Maybe the buyer's broker gets a couple initials and they deposit earnest money. They have made acts moving forward in the contract, which would be, and I'm not an attorney, none of us are attorneys here, but that shows that in a good faith effort, all parties are moving forward within the confines of that contract. What are your thoughts on as is when you're in a multiple offer situation, Shannon? To make your offer a little more appealing, what should you be thinking about if you're going to put in an as is component?
Well, I would say if you're comfortable with purchasing a house, if you're comfortable with repairs, there are some buyers that are not comfortable with that. But if that's something that you would be comfortable with, I would put in an offer as is, just still contingent upon you doing your due diligence. I would still want to give that buyer the opportunity to do inspections. I would still want to give them the opportunity to hire a few professionals. Maybe they do an inspection and they need a couple more professionals to look at a few things that were of concern to them. They can choose at that point. They could say, well, I know that there's a handful of things here to be done, but I'm willing to take it that way. Or they can say, this is over my head and I don't want to take it. But that also gives the seller kind of that comfort that they're not going to be nitpicked at the end. They're not going to settle for their offer when they had multiple offers because they said it was as is, and then they're just going to get a ton of repairs in there. They know that if there's repairs that are needing to be there, they're probably substantial.
Yeah, and that's a pretty big lever for a buyer to pull. Aspen, what are your thoughts on the as-is component? How do you approach that to protect your buyer, but how do you make it appealing for your seller?
I don't really recommend, completely not doing any inspections. You should at least do your own research inspections. But one thing that I did quite a bit, and I still do, is saying we're going to do inspections by this date, and we'll have the option to terminate by this date, but we're not going to nickel and dime you with objecting to any inspections. So that still it kind of protects both parties. So, maybe the seller negotiated a lot more off the top than they would have if there was going to be inspections. So it kind of just gives everyone the expectation from the beginning of what the price is going to be while still allowing the buyer to do their due diligence.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I always compare it to a car. Like I'll buy the car as is, but I want to lift the hood to make sure there's an engine there, right? And understand what I'm purchasing. That is a stressor that a lot of sellers have, is that they don't want to go with an offer and then be nickeled and dimed and have this whole battle leading up to it. Oftentimes we do pre-inspections. It's where if you feel like a property is going to go in a multiple offer situation, should you be talking to your seller about pre-inspections? And how effective would that be from a negotiation standpoint? Paul, you want to take that one? Yeah. Hey, here's your curveball.
Yeah. I will not do it as well as Shannon did. If you expect, we don't ever know what houses are going to get multiple offers. We can think that, this house is going to go great, but it doesn't always work out that way. So if we're pricing it appropriately and we think that there could be multiple offers, having that pre-inspection could be a good tool to have as a seller to say, look, we know what's going on with the house. We've repaired these things. We're giving it to you in the best condition so that when you're giving me your offer, you now can feel comfortable that there's not going to be a lot of hidden issues that you're going to discover in your inspection period.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty powerful to be able to hand someone a report and say, here's the things that were wrong. Here's the things that we've done. Now, going into this negotiation, if you're competing with other offers, make it as clean as possible. So if you're working with a seller, Aspen, what are some of the other things you have a conversation with them when you receive multiple?
There's a lot of things. It could be, just because it's the highest price doesn't mean it's going to be the best offer. Is it, cash? Are they asking for a home warranty? Maybe there's just so many things. Did they put their best foot forward first? That can be really appealing, I think, for people. Whenever you're coming just to multiple offers, I think just really analyzing each one, letting the seller make their best educated decision with the options that are available. And maybe there's two offers that are very, very close. Maybe one will want to become a backup offer. So then you have a little bit of an option with that as well. So I think if just have your realtor, you accept the one, but then calling the other broker and saying, they were very, very close. Would your buyers like to have a backup offer? A lot of times I think they'll say yes.
Sure.
Because things do happen during the inspection. Maybe funding falls through or the appraisal comes back or whatever it might be. Things happen. Yeah,
things always happen. And it's nice to have a backup offer in play. Sometimes a backup offer, if you have that in place, solidifies the first offer because people are like, oh, look, there's someone behind us in a backup position. I don't want to lose this first position.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's one of those things that for a seller, that's great. For a buyer, may not be the best situation. They may want to wait to go in a backup position.
I do think it can be win-win though. And if your buyer is willing to pay X amount and they're happy with what they're getting and, maybe the inspections didn't come back quite as clean as they want, but you can fix anything. I think then they can say, you know what, I am going to move forward with this house, and it can be a win-win. It doesn't have to be forcing someone's hand one way or another.
Yeah. And what about, you had alluded to before where people, maybe they play the game too much and that may hurt a buyer, right? From a seller's perspective. So let's say you have 4 offers and 3 of them put their best foot forward and the 4th one was really low, but then they come in to be the highest. Is that a red flag?
I think it is, because that tells me, oh, you're going to really negotiate during inspections and you're going to try and get it back below versus someone coming with, maybe they are asking for some closing costs, but they upped the price to cover that, or maybe they're offering to pay for a little bit of yours, or they're just a really clean offer. I think people understate how appealing a clean, normal offer can be for people. You don't need to pull out every trick in the books. You just need to come with your best foot forward. And whenever I sold my rental house a few years ago, we had multiple offers and someone ended up coming, I think, $5,000 higher. But the people that we ended up going with, they wanted their first house and they put their best foot forward first. And it was a pretty smooth deal overall.
So they put their best foot forward first. They didn't waffle, so there was stability. Because I think our viewers need to understand there's the perception from another realtor and a seller is that if you have a lot of waffling back and forth, a big swing in offer price, even if it nets you the highest, it is a red flag for a seller to go, ooh, like Aspen said, are these people going to beat us up on a home inspection? They seem pretty volatile. There's a lot to be said just by how you act through the offer process.
I have one going right now that is the opposite of all that. So I told them up front all of the conditions and stressors for the sellers. We get an offer in for $40,000, $50,000 under asking. And we just go, no, we can't do that. Sellers can't do that. I've told you all these reasons why they can't do that. Then they split that difference or come up a little bit and go, no, it's full price. It has to be full price. They come in and do full price and a little bit of a concession, and the sellers are okay with that. At the beginning, I'm going, red flags everywhere. This is not going to go well. Now we're 2 weeks to closing, waived inspection or didn't do home inspections. I mean, it's been a smooth process. Now they're telling us how much they love the house.
That's an anomaly.
Yeah. So you never know what you're going to get.
They just needed to feel that they got the best price they could.
Yeah.
They needed to go through that, and those buyers needed to go through that in their head and know that they could not have done any better. And now they know.
Yeah.
And they're happy.
And the sellers are happy with us because we fought for them and got them the deal that they could accept.
Yeah, and that's okay. People have to go through that process sometimes. Sometimes it's just about allowing them to go through the process. Just be aware that you're sending inaudible signals to the seller as you're negotiating and as you take your stance. And that's where I think going back to, a good, clean, straightforward, unwavering offer is really valuable to a seller. Speaks volumes to a large degree. Any other advice you would give to maximize? I mean, how dismayed can buyers get when you start going back and nitpicking and all that? Is there dangers there if you go back? Shannon, why don't you take this one? If you go back and you start nitpicking buyers in a multiple offer situation, are you in danger of losing the buyers altogether?
Sure, because buyers can get jaded just like sellers can. Buyers start feeling like, they really want the house, but then they start feeling like, now my arm's just being twisted. Like I'm giving you everything I can. I'm giving you everything you asked for. And now you're just looking for, can I get a little more out of me?
Yeah. Getting greedy.
Yeah. And people really do. They feel that, because it is an emotional purchase for them. They want the home. They're offering on the home, especially if they've done the best that they can do. It doesn't hurt to ask if they can do a little bit more. But I think when you keep doing that to people, you'll start finding those buyers are going to start dropping off. Yeah. They're just, they get really jaded really fast. They don't want to be treated that way. They want to know that you're in it with them, that you really want to sell them the home and they really want to buy the home and you're working together. They want to feel that way.
And that could pay big dividends down the road because you never know. You made this point in a previous podcast, is you never know when you got to call on that seller or buyer and ask for a favor, a little bit extra time or whatever it is in the contract. So you don't want to really be beating them up along the way.
Yeah.
And especially in multiple offer situations, we're seeing a lot where the interest rates have gone up. Sellers are still holding on to yesterday's values. And so we get something under contract and then the tension begins. And so you really don't want to start the whole deal off on a bad foot. So that seems pretty important, especially nowadays, to get to the finish line. Any other thoughts?
I think Paul had an experience with earnest money going hard.
Oh,
Tom fee.
Yeah. So you want to talk about that? For our viewers, a Tom fee is a time off the market fee. And that's where a buyer just writes a check directly to the seller. That money's gone. Say, thank you, Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, for taking your home off the market. We're going to pay you some money just so we can do our inspections. And then you have earnest money, which can be hard as well. Usually earnest money has contingencies involved, and that's deposited typically with a title company. And that earnest money is directed to however the deal flows. So if a buyer moves forward and closes, it's applied to their closing costs or down payment. And if they back out outside of their contingencies, then it should be applied to the seller. Paul, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. I think we had this in a previous conversation. I can't remember how it went, but so I had the question before that was a lot of times in multiple offers, people were putting in non-refundable earnest money as an enticement to the seller to accept their offer. And I've never used it that way. I have had a deal that's gone a little bit difficult in one of Aspen's deals with me.
With my house, yeah.
Yeah. I say a little bit difficult. It was stressful for me too. But I think at one point, we had gotten to a point where it was either the deal's going to go through or let's just stop and start all over with somebody else. And the contingency that they put in was that the earnest money had to go non-refundable.
Yeah.
And after a few months, everything was done. The appraisal was done. Inspections were done. So at that point, it really was just, this is going hard to show you we are 100% committed. Yeah. It might take longer.
Yeah. We're not going to.
That's one of the only times I would.
Yeah. We're not going to back out over something insignificant now.
Yeah. And at that
point, this is going to work, or the world's telling us this deal's not going through.
And rightfully so, earnest money should be hard at that point. You've exhausted all your contingencies. Really, if you don't perform, it's not at the fault of the seller, and the seller's taking time off the market in your situation. So very appropriate. But again, it speaks to having a professional in your corner working on your behalf to help you navigate these what could be rocky waters in a lot of instances. So let's move on to the speed round. Paul, I'm going to start with you. As a buyer's broker, what can you do to help your buyer stand out on an offer in a multiple offer situation? What's the best advice you can give your buyer?
After these 2 podcasts that we've talked about this, I think I like the clean offer. Put your best foot forward in a nice clean offer. Have as few contingencies, few messy, sticky situations in there as possible.
Okay. Sounds good. Aspen?
I would say the clean offer. Make sure your realtor is calling the listing broker to see if there's anything that is specific they're wanting, and then maybe adjusting based on that. And then just coming in with your best foot forward. You can do escalation clauses. You can pay for some of their closing costs. You can offer way over asking. But if you just come in and say, this is what I can do, you just know you've done what you can and you're not going to lose the house over, maybe you don't get it, but at least you really put your best foot forward first.
Yep. Shannon?
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
Just put your best foot forward. If you're in multiple offer situations, there are other people that want that house. You may not be able to do everything that seller wants, but you do the best you could do. It's not the time to hold back. It's not the time to try to keep an ace in your pocket and see if you can get a little better deal.
Yeah.
Not the time to do it. If it's the right house, you don't do that.
I think that's great advice. And I would echo that. I would say that if you are making an offer and you're in a multiple offer situation, have your realtor reach out to the other realtor, find out what their stressors are, and then put your best foot forward. But you also have to have a conversation with yourself. Is this something that is your home that you want for the rest of your years? Or is it something that, throw it out there, and if it works, it works. That's a different ball game. So understand your motivations there. So thank you for that great discussion. We do want to highlight in the Lyons Pride, this is my favorite part of the podcast, the Lyons Pride section, where we highlight an individual, an event, an organization in the community that makes our community better, because as Lyons Group members, we dedicate our time and resources to helping our community. And we want to highlight an event, a person, or an organization that does the same. Aspen, it's your turn.
So I actually had to look back because I could not believe that we hadn't already nominated this person. He is involved in every board in town, every nonprofit, really, really involved with advocating for local community as well. Vince Moffitt, who owns Basin Health and has some other organizations as well. But I think a lot of people don't know that or maybe they do, that he used to be a firefighter, but he also owns Arroyo Rescue, which does river rescues here. And then also he volunteers for Team Rubicon, which goes around the country during natural disasters and helps people that are in need in a broader sense than just here locally.
Ah, great choice. Yeah, Vince is fantastic. And I knew him back when he was a firefighter, and he hasn't changed one bit other than we got a little bit more chrome in our beards, right? But Vince, what a great person. He's done a lot for our community. He does not have to do everything that he does, and he steps up day after day, month after month, year after year to help our community, not only here locally, but across the country. And we just want to say here at the Lyons Group and at the Den that, Vince, we see you. We thank you for all you've done for our community, all the years of service, and we know that you're going to continue to make our community better. So thank you and welcome to the Lyons Pride. Great choice, Aspen. That was a good one. You do want to stay tuned for our next episode, because our next episode, we're going to be talking about liability, buyer liability, seller liability, and even some realtor liability. We're going to talk about that on the next episode. But if you like this episode, please like and share our content. We do have a YouTube channel that you can go on and post some ideas if you want some specific talking points or a topic that you want us to discuss. Throw it on there. We love engagement with our viewers. We've had some great feedback from the podcast. It's really exciting to see the people that are watching and engaging with our content. But you can go and like our Facebook page with Instagram, TikTok, everything in between. So if you're looking to buy or sell, schedule a consultation with any one of us here at the Lyons Group, because we're happy to sit down with you and talk about strategy in today's market to give you an advantage. So please do that when you have time. And thank you for joining us in this episode of The Den. Thank you for listening to The Den, powered by the Lyons Group. Hit the subscribe button to keep informed on real estate happenings. If you'd like to learn more about the Lyons Group, visit sjcbroker.com. Complex markets require complex strategies. The Lyons Group can give you a true advantage in any market. Whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial, contact us directly at sjcbroker.com. We're time-tested experts with a client-first approach, and we'll see you next time in The Den.